What's going on, y'all? It's Greg. Greg said it. We're back with our inspiration motivation. We had a nice live early today. We just kind of had a come to Jesus moment. Gave people a chance to kind of express themselves. It's kind of like the stages of grief. It's kind of like it's hard to settle in on the Colorado season when it's over, but it's not over. And this is the first year for the bowl game, so it's a little different, especially compared to last year. But just the hopes of going and people finally just coming to reckon that Colorado didn't make it to the Big 12, not gonna make it to the some people after the situation where it was decided, it was like, so we didn't make it, are we gonna make it? And some people still in denial about that. And you also look at the fact that now we see Arizona State won and they beat the mess out of Iowa State and they getting the bye, and it's like, oh, would they have done that with Colorado? Oh, now Colorado's not there. They both getting a bye. Boise State got a bye, and it's like, oh, they could have been us, and it just hurts even more. It hurts to see Arizona State. I was looking at a game on the screen. It was showing Texas Tech versus Colorado, and it was showing the rankings and how close Colorado was. Because, after they won that game, they pretty much was in first place, and it was in their hands just to win out the last few games, which we did except one. And I remember looking at Arizona State was nowhere in that. It was like the top 4, top 5 teams. Arizona State wasn't there. They just came out of nowhere and snuck up on everybody. They messed around and beat, I think probably that same day, they beat Kansas State, either that day or the next week. It's like, oh, and then they beat BYU, and that just swung them right in there. They beat the right teams, and they beat them at the right time. And you really look at it, they kind of started off slow. They barely won some games. They lost to Texas Tech and Cincinnati, which is not necessarily the world beaters. Texas Tech was going strong at that time. Cincinnati was trying to put on something when they played us later, but, they could throw that ball. And they both beat Arizona State. But then as you see in the end, it's like they kicked in, like almost like NFL style, like kind of like how the Patriots used to do before their run, where they'd like be a little over 500, come in on a wild card, and just run through the playoff. And it's like this team came out of nowhere. They had 2 losses and was not on nobody's record. I guess people assumed they was going to lose more because they lost them fairly early, while a lot of us was still undefeated. Like we were undefeated, and then we lost 1 to Kansas State. And I guess they had to just wait their turn because everybody else was undefeated. Iowa State was undefeated. BYU was undefeated until late. Kansas State only had 1 loss, and they lost to BYU, and it was us who had 1 loss to Kansas State. So we was watching Kansas State. Nobody was watching Arizona State. Nobody was watching them because at that point they was done. They had a fairly good record, but everybody else was undefeated, only lost 1 game. And then slowly, teams started losing, and they played a hand in it because they gave Kansas State another loss, and they gave BYU another loss. So they helped themselves a lot. Then they went and spanked Iowa State in the championship. They didn't lose to Arizona like they shouldn't have lost. They won the games they supposed to win. And Colorado had it. I feel like they supposed to beat Kansas. Some people say, oh, they couldn't beat Kansas. And look here, Kansas clearly was beatable. Kansas actually got spanked the next week at Baylor. And people say, oh, we should have lost to Baylor, but we didn't. And they spanked Kansas. Kansas is not unspankable. Colorado just went up there and just arm tackled the whole game. It made them just look like world beaters. People say their line was so big, but you was in the backfield. What good is being so big and so whatever? And it's not like you was blowing them off the ball. They was missing tackles left and right, behind the line, at the line, upfield. It was ugly. It was ugly. And because of they couldn't do that, they did a very good job of running out the clock. I mean, they ran out 7 to 8 minutes, probably 9 in some quarters. And Colorado, they scored, but they just had the ball by half the time, half the possessions. I mean, what can you blame the offense on? It wasn't all that, but hey, what do you expect? They played slow all year, which was a whole nother issue. And that kind of brought up a point of what we talked about this morning, or afternoon. We go live 12:30, and I was talking about mindset, and I got really deep into that thing. I said, boy, y'all done got me into inspiration motivation early, Y'all make sure y'all go check that out. And if you haven't liked, share, subscribe, this is your time to do it. Go ahead and get that subscription. Because we really went in there because we talked about how Colorado said over and over and over again, we're going to make the bowl games. Who said it was wrong? I didn't say it was wrong. But it's all about programming, and it's all about expectation. It's all about goal setting. So they need to have a really good conversation, because I feel like Coach Prime is at his wit's end on it. I feel like he's acknowledged there's some issues with penalties and lack of consistency and lack of motivation. He's pointed out the slow starts. He's pointed out a lot of different things. And it's not that he's not pointing it out. It's just at this point, I don't believe he know what to do about it, because if he did, he would. And I suggested Shador, but I always said it wasn't just him. And I'm not just, I got no malice in it, because I feel like they definitely need a solid sports psychologist. I mean, they bring the military in, they do this, they got all these staff members, and Coach Prime do a good job of trying to motivate them. But it's a component where at some point you see a pattern and it's different players. You got to figure that thing out. Like, where is this coming from? Like, what's in our culture? What are we doing? What are we saying? What are we not saying that is an underline of why we keep having these slow starts? And we saying don't do it, and we're going to work on it. We keep doing it with the talent and all. And I'm going to be honest, it's something there, because they did at Jackson State. He had the same issue. It's just that they just was way more talented, and they got away with it. And when they had a challenge in the close games because of that. But eventually they would pull away, just like they played with Texas Tech, and then we close and pull away. They did it, they did it against a few teams. It wasn't abnormal. And then it was a few games where they played completely from behind. They let a team get up on them 2, 3 touchdowns. You got to run them down. The problem is when you can't run them down. The problem is when you don't have the time to run them down. Hence, Kansas. You got to think about, some habits are going to come back on you. And I gave plenty of examples. I gave money examples. I gave people on drugs, addicts, how they say they want to stop, but they can't. People who want to lose weight or get in shape. About to come to the new year, all these resolutions. People talk about what they know they should do, could do, would do, but they can't do it. Why? Why can't a person do what they say they're going to do? Why can't some people, why can't most people do what they say that they know they should be doing? It's not like they don't have a motivation. They may not have enough motivation, or maybe work you got to do, the pain. They talk about the pain and reward balance. Sometimes the pain is not enough. Sometimes the reward is not enough for the pain. Sometimes you like, yeah, I should do it, but I'm not really ready to pay that cost. That's a little too much for just that. It's not enough. I talk about it. I talk through it. It sounds good. But at the end of the day, I'm a lot more comfortable over here. Sometimes you're a little too comfortable. And I feel like Colorado was comfortable in a sense, because, you reached that mark fairly early. Even after you lost that game against Kansas State, you reached your mark early. It wasn't like you struggled to the end. You reached it early. With your conference and non-conference games, you reached that, 6-game mark to the 7-game mark. You reached the mark to be bowl eligible. And the issue is, that was your goal. You may not realize it. You said it over and over and over again. And you program yourself to that versus saying over and over again, I'm going to be a conference champion. Because even if you get to the conference championship and win, you go on the playoff, or not, you go on the bowl game anyway. So why shoot for below when you can go in and get it? And I argue the fact, I don't believe they really want. People say, oh, that was the goal. I don't think that was the goal. I think it was the option. Clearly, it was played like it was an option. It was available. It was on the calendar. But our goal is get Miss Peggy to the bowl game. And they said it. And that's just, it's in the proof is in the pudding. It's like a person saying, hey, I would love to lose 30 pounds, but my goal is 10 pounds. And then if you hit the 10-pound goal and you kind of relax, we tried to figure out what principle that was, Parkinson's, whatever. What that principle is, when you hit that mark and you hit it earlier, maybe you blow through your goals, instead of keep going, most people just kind of settle right there. They could go ahead and get that 30 pounds, but I got my 10 because that was my real goal. Your real goal will always reveal itself. And that's that mindset thing. And I think that's the next level for Colorado. I really do. I think Colorado's next level is mindset, not talent, not being able to get people there, not getting people to believe, because I think mindset overrides belief. I think it either is going to help belief or it's going to override it, because sometimes people are not real with themselves, or sometimes people don't know the difference. Like the people who say, oh, well, the goal was always the championship. You don't know. It wasn't the goal. It wasn't the goal. Okay. It may have became the goal over time, or it may have been an additional goal, add-on, an option. But this bowl game ain't optional, and that's how they treated it, and that's how they verbalized it. Clearly, the championship was optional. It would have been great to have, but as long as I got my bowl game. And I'm not saying this to say that it's wrong or right. I'm just saying why I kept saying, be careful what you put out there. Like, as a person, I've given different examples, and I'm sure you all can give out many other ones, because at the end of the day, the challenge in life is to set attainable goals and set goals high enough to push you. Don't ever set goals that's going to make you hit below the mark, right? You always want to shoot for a goal that's above the mark to make sure you hit it. Because if you just shoot for the mark, you typically going to fall short of the mark. And that's just strategy. And that's tricking the mind, because the average person mind, they just not programmed. They're just not trained enough to understand how this works. So that's why, again, I go back to like a sports psychologist. I didn't say a shrink. I just said somebody who can help you mentally process things, to help you to understand what you're trying to do. Because you may not do it. People love to say, oh, these young kids, they just 20-something. Exactly. They don't know how to reach their full potential. It's more than just running drills and lifting weights. We know that 80, probably 90% of the battle is mental. We know that, yet we don't invest into it. I don't see them invested in it. I could be wrong, but it's somebody need to be fired. But I think we don't either. I remember coming up in a world where I was right out of high school and into college, first few years, couple years. And I know my mom used to tell me to look at like personal growth and development. She was in like the multi-level marketing. And later I kind of came across the same type of information and culture. And I learned very early about a lot of these things, and about mindset and personal growth and development. And I always said everybody should do that. But I know only certain people do it because it comes with the field they're in. But everybody needs it, because you quickly realize your mind is messed up. You don't know you messed up until the light is shined on it, until you can compare it, or until you're around people with a different mindset. And you just typically not going to run into that when you're 18, 19, 20 years old. I know I didn't. I mean, the people I was running with was 30, 40 plus. And that's because they have lived life, and they know the mistakes, and they know the pitfalls, and they know all of that. And it's good to know it, because it's a big difference when you feed in your mind certain stuff. It's a big difference when you're around people culturally who just, they're on another level. And it's like, it's a saying, the rising tide raises all ships. And it's like the water is not just going to raise one boat. If that water raised, everybody can raise. Little boat, big boat, everybody raise. And that's how it works. The mind is very interesting. It's very deep. You got to be very particular, very careful about what you put in your head. And that goes back to that music. I don't know how much, I'm sure a part of it has to do with that, because that is part of the culture, the hip-hop culture. And hip-hop culture typically is very toxic and very negative. It's cute, the beat's nice, but it's not very good for the mind, and on any level of life. Sometimes they got that motivation component, but it's a negative component to it. And when you listen to it, it's repetition. It doesn't really feed what you're trying to do. unless you're trying to go kill somebody and do some whatever it's talking about. That's why I say it's negative, because the context is not applicable. You try to make it applicable in football, like go hit somebody, go take over and this, that, but clearly it don't help you outside of that emotional level. And I think the emotional level is very high at Colorado. Every play is a dance, it's a celebration. I think it's a lot of emotion and passion there. But when you really look down into the mindset, I think a lot of people will say, I don't really know why I do what I do and why I don't do what I do. And that's no different than the average person. But I think that when you got the hype and emotion, you can hide it, or at least hide it from yourself. And then you quickly realize, I'm not performing. And I don't know why. I was hyped, I was amped, and I get out there and act like none of that even happened. I act like say you scared, or you're not focused, or you're not disciplined, or because they don't feed that. They feed the emotion, but it ain't feeding the mindset. So we all got to do better. I think Colorado got to do better. I know Colorado got to do better. I know we all got to do better. You know, get you some audio books. This is plenty of good books that it'll make you feel refreshed. You know, it ain't just a spiritual, even though some good spiritual books and spiritual principles. And I didn't say religious, and I didn't say all religions. I can't speak for everybody, but I can say that there are a lot of solid principle books that even people with different beliefs benefit from, because they are true principles. And it helps you to kind of go through those components that'll sabotage you, the negativity, the fear, the doubt, and there's stuff behind why in the world you keep failing, why in the world you keep coming short. I think all those things, it will make a big difference in the performance and the success going forward in Colorado and in all our life. But I'm just Greg. Greg said it. Make sure y'all like, share, subscribe, comment right here, and I'll be talking to y'all soon.